Chandeliers of Starlight Bistro cast a deceptive glow over Seattle's elite, but Serena Wilson Reed stood in shadows at the bar, her black dress a silent rebellion. Tonight was meant for celebration. 8 years with Julian, a table for two, her grandmother's diamond bracelet glinting under candlelight. Instead, a champagne flute trembled in her hand, its bubbles mocking her unraveling world. Across the room, Julian's laugh pierced the din, his fingers brushing a woman's wrist. Clara, not her. A glint caught Serena's eye, her bracelet, its Art Deco clasp unmistakable, now adorning a stranger. His voice carried, weaving a tale of heirlooms that wasn't his to tell. Her pulse quickened, not with pain, but with a chef's precision, honed for moments that demanded perfection. The restaurant hummed, oblivious to the storm brewing. Serena's gaze hardened, secrets whispering in the clink of glass. What had Julian taken beyond her legacy? And what would she reclaim? Tonight, every step toward their table was a promise, veiled in mystery, poised to shatter the night. Hello guys! If you love a story like this, please like, subscribe, and comment. Let's dive into the story now. Is everything all right, chef? Luca, my head bartender, refilled my flute with Dom Perignon, the same bottle I'd been saving for Julian and me to share tonight, our 8th anniversary. Just taking a breather, I lied, forcing a smile. The kitchen has everything under control. 30 minutes earlier, I'd slipped away from the controlled chaos of the kitchen to freshen up before Julian arrived. We had reservations at 8, a table for two that I'd personally arranged with a tasting menu that told the story of our relationship through food, 8 courses for 8 years. I'd even asked the pastry chef to recreate our wedding cake for dessert. My phone had dinged with a text message as I was reapplying my lipstick. Need to change reservation to accommodate colleague, table for two. But I'll be bringing Clara from the campaign office. You understand? Happy anniversary, we'll make it up to you. I'd stared at that message for a full minute, my heart sinking as I reread those clinical words. You understand? Did I? This wasn't the first time Julian had prioritized his budding political career over our marriage, but bringing another woman to our anniversary dinner. That was new. I called the maitre d' immediately. There's been a change to my husband's reservation, I said calmly. Please keep his table for two, but add a glass of our best champagne at the bar. That'll be for me. Now I watched as Julian laughed at something Miss Clara said, his hand lingering on her forearm. She was everything I wasn't, polished in that campaign-ready way, with honey blonde hair that fell in perfect waves past her shoulders. Her red dress hugged curves that my chef's coat had hidden for years. I tugged self-consciously at my black dress, the one I'd bought especially for tonight, now feeling like an afterthought in my own restaurant. 8 anniversaries. The first, we'd gone camping in Oregon, making love under the stars after a dinner of hot dogs and beans. The 5th, Paris, where Julian had surprised me with cooking classes at Le Cordon Bleu, the push I'd needed to pursue my culinary dreams. Last year, he'd forgotten entirely. Coming home at midnight with a hastily purchased gas station rose and mumbles about campaign meetings running late. I fingered the stem of my champagne flute, remembering how we used to be before the campaign, before his ambitions for state senate consumed everything, before I became a box to check on his path to political success. Supportive wife, check. Small business owner, check. All-American backstory, check. The sommelier approached their table with the wine I'd selected for us, a 2012 Barolo that we'd first tasted on our honeymoon in Tuscany. Julian was making a show of it, explaining the wine to Clara as if he were the expert. I watched her lean forward, captivated by whatever story he was telling. Then the light caught something on her wrist, and my entire body went cold. The bracelet. My grandmother's tennis bracelet, delicate diamonds set in white gold with a distinctive Art Deco clasp that couldn't be mistaken for anything else. I'd worn it on our wedding day as my something old. It had been in my family for 3 generations. I remembered the day I'd shown it to Julian, telling him about my grandmother pawning it during hard times to keep our family afloat, only to buy it back years later with her saved tips as a waitress, how she'd given it to me on her deathbed, making me promise to only share it with someone worthy of our family's resilience. Julian was gesturing animatedly now, clearly deep into some campaign anecdote. I caught fragments. Family heirloom, and passed down for generations. He was telling my family's story, claiming my history as part of his narrative. And Clara was looking at that bracelet with awe, running her fingers over the diamonds that should have been on my wrist tonight. My shock crystallized into something harder, colder. This wasn't just a forgotten anniversary or a career prioritized over marriage. This was theft of my heirloom, my history, my dignity. "Luca," I said quietly, never taking my eyes off their table, "could you please call Marcus from security? Tell him I need assistance with a situation in about 10 minutes. "Of course, chef. Is everything okay?" "It will be," I replied, setting down my champagne. "It absolutely will be." As I slid off the stool, smoothing down my dress, I noticed another man seated at the far end of the bar. He kept glancing toward Julian's table, his expression darkening with each look. He was nursing what appeared to be his third whiskey, wedding ring glinting under the ambient lighting. Something about his discomfort resonated with mine. My mind raced as I approached the hostess stand, checking the reservation system. There it was, Clara Bennett. A quick social media search confirmed my suspicion. The man at the bar was Nathan Bennett, Clara's husband. The reservation had originally been in his name before Julian changed it. I felt a calm clarity wash over me as the pieces fell into place. The betrayal was even more calculated than I'd thought. This wasn't just an inappropriate work dinner. They hadn't even tried to be discreet, using their real names, coming to my restaurant on my anniversary. I took a deep breath and made my way toward their table, my chef's instincts taking over. In the kitchen, timing is everything. The perfect moment to remove a steak from heat, to add the final seasoning, to present the dish. This confrontation required the same precision. As I approached, Julian still hadn't noticed me, too engrossed in whatever lie he was spinning. One hand now covering Clara's, the diamonds of my grandmother's bracelet catching the light between their intertwined fingers. 3 steps away, I finally caught his eye. For just a second, I saw panic flash across his face before he composed himself, plastering on that campaign-ready smile I'd grown to despise. "Serena, there you are," he exclaimed, too loudly. "I was just telling Clara about your restaurant. Join us." In that moment, looking at my husband pretending nothing was wrong while another woman wore my family's legacy on her wrist, something inside me hardened into diamond-like resolve. 8 years of compromises, of stepping back so he could step forward, of swallowing disappointment. It all ended tonight. I smiled, feeling more powerful with each step toward their table. "Oh, I wouldn't miss this for the world, darling. Happy anniversary to us, indeed." Time seemed to slow as I approached their table, each step bringing me closer to a confrontation I never imagined having on what should have been one of the happiest nights of my life. My focus narrowed to the glittering diamonds encircling Clara's wrist, diamonds that held stories she couldn't possibly understand. The bracelet had first belonged to my great-grandmother, Lillian, a wedding gift from her husband before he left for World War II. When he never returned, that bracelet became her lifeline. She sold one diamond at a time to feed her children during those desperate years, replacing each stone as she built a small dressmaking business from her kitchen table. By the time she passed it to my grandmother, Margaret, every diamond had been earned twice over. Mom always said that bracelet carried our family's tenacity in each stone. "Diamond hard, diamond bright," she would whisper, running her fingers over the clasp. That's how Wilson women survive. I remembered sitting at my grandmother's vanity as a child, watching her fasten that bracelet before heading to her night shift. Margaret had worked as a waitress at Dawson's Diner for 37 years, first to put my mother through college, then to help my parents when Dad's construction business faltered. The bracelet would catch the light as she poured coffee, the only luxury she allowed herself. "Why don't you sell it?" I once asked her during a particularly lean month when I overheard my parents discussing unpaid bills. Margaret had cupped my face in her hands, her eyes fierce despite her gentle touch. "Serena Jane, some things are worth more than their price tag. This bracelet isn't just diamonds. It's every sacrifice, every triumph, every moment we chose courage over comfort. Someday, when you understand what really matters, it'll be yours." I understood in 2008 when the Great Recession hit, and my grandmother faced foreclosure on the small craftsman house my grandfather had built with his own hands. I was in culinary school then, barely making ends meet myself. She called me one evening, her voice strained but determined. "I'm pawning the bracelet tomorrow," she said simply. "Grandma, no, there must be another way. I can drop out, get a full-time job." "This is exactly what it's for," she interrupted. "Your education matters. This house matters. The bracelet has saved this family before, and it will again." For 9 months, the bracelet sat in a pawn shop while my grandmother worked double shifts despite her arthritis, while I catered events between classes, while we both pretended not to count the days until the loan would default. I still remember the afternoon we walked into that shop together, how her hands trembled as she counted out the cash, the last payment with $23 to spare. "See," she said, clasping it back onto her wrist where it belonged, "diamond hard, diamond bright." When she died 3 years later, I was the only one at her bedside. My parents had moved to Nevada by then, and my sister was stationed overseas. Margaret slipped the bracelet from her wrist to mine with the last of her strength. "Remember what really matters," she whispered, "and only share this with someone worthy of our legacy." I thought Julian was worthy. We met when he came to the restaurant where I was sous chef, campaigning for city council. He charmed everyone, remembering names, asking thoughtful questions about the neighborhood. When he asked for my number, I surprised myself by saying yes. Our courtship was a whirlwind. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn evening much like tonight, he proposed at the lakeshore. I said yes without hesitation, certain I'd found someone who valued family and hard work as much as I did. A week before our wedding, I showed him the bracelet for the first time, telling him its history as we sat on the porch swing of my grandmother's house, our house now. "This is remarkable," he said, examining the antique clasp. "It must be worth a fortune." "It's priceless," I corrected him. "It survived the depression, war, recession. Everything life has thrown at the women in my family." Julian looked at me with such tenderness then. "I'll never let anything happen to it or to you." 2 days after our wedding, I found him studying the insurance appraisal. "Just being responsible," he explained. "Something this valuable needs proper protection." I believed him. I believed him about so many things. 4 years into our marriage, when Julian decided to run for state senate, our savings weren't enough for the campaign launch. We sat at our kitchen table, reviewing our assets, when he suggested refinancing the house. "This is my grandmother's house," I protested. "It's been paid off for years. It's an investment in our future," he countered. "Once I'm elected, we'll pay it off again in no time." When I hesitated, his eyes fell on my wrist. "What about the bracelet?" "Just temporarily, we could get a short-term loan against it." The hurt must have shown on my face because he immediately backtracked. "I'm sorry, that was thoughtless. I know what it means to you." That night, I made the decision that seemed like trust at the time. I slipped the bracelet into his hand. "Keep it in the safe at your office," I said. "I'm afraid of something happening to it during restaurant prep, and this way, it's safe but still with us." He'd kissed me deeply. "I'll guard it with my life." That was the last time I saw my grandmother's bracelet until tonight, gleaming on another woman's wrist, being passed off as some generous gift from my husband. As I stood before their table now, looking at Clara's perfectly manicured fingers tracing the diamonds that represented my family's struggle and triumph, a cold clarity. The legacy of this bracelet wasn't just about maintaining a family heirloom. It was about the strength to do what needed to be done, no matter how difficult. My grandmother had pawned this bracelet to save what mattered. Now it was my turn to reclaim not just the diamonds but everything they stood for. "What a beautiful piece," I said, my voice steady as I locked eyes with my husband. "Would you mind if I had a closer look?" Clara's smile faltered as she glanced between Julian and me. "Oh, of course," she said, extending her wrist with practiced charm. "It's absolutely stunning." I gently took her hand, examining the bracelet while Julian shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The tension at the table was palpable, but I wasn't ready for the confrontation, not yet. I needed to understand the full extent of their betrayal first. "Exquisite craftsmanship," I remarked, releasing her wrist. "Julian has excellent taste in family heirlooms." I gave him a pointed look before adding, "I should get back to the kitchen." "Enjoy your meal." I walked away, feeling Julian's eyes burning into my back. Instead of returning to the kitchen, I reclaimed my spot at the bar, this time positioning myself where I could observe their table without being obvious. Luca slid a fresh glass of champagne toward me without a word. From this vantage point, I could see how Julian leaned in too close when speaking to Clara, how her hand occasionally brushed his, how they shared glances that spoke of more than professional camaraderie. Each interaction revealed layers of intimacy that had clearly developed over time. I thought back to the first sign something was wrong in our marriage. 6 months ago, Julian had started coming home smelling of unfamiliar perfume. Campaign events, he'd explained. You shake 100 hands, hug dozens of supporters. I'd nodded, ignoring that the scent was always the same. Then came the late-night strategy sessions that couldn't be interrupted, the weekend retreats with his campaign team that I wasn't invited to attend, the sudden password on his phone for security reasons. Each oddity I'd rationalized away, making excuses for the man I thought I'd married. Refill? Luca asked, interrupting my thoughts. I shook my head. I need to stay clear-headed. 3 months ago, I'd found a receipt for a hotel downtown in his suit pocket while doing laundry. When confronted, Julian had an explanation ready. A donor meeting ran late, and it didn't make sense to drive home. The hotel was 3 blocks from our house. Last month, I'd stopped by his campaign headquarters unannounced, bringing lunch for everyone. His secretary was flustered, saying he was in a meeting that couldn't be disturbed. Through the frosted glass of his office door, I could make out 2 silhouettes standing suspiciously close. Even then, I'd convinced myself it was nothing. Julian was an affectionate person. He stood close to everyone. He touched people's arms when he spoke to them. I was being paranoid, letting my insecurities get the best of me. My gaze drifted to the man at the end of the bar, Nathan Bennett, still nursing his whiskey, still watching their table. How much did he know? Had he suspected before tonight, or was this betrayal as fresh for him as it was for me? The sommelier was clearing Julian and Clara's appetizer plates now. They seemed to have moved on from the awkwardness of my visit, laughing together over something private. Julian's hand disappeared beneath the table. I turned away, the ache in my chest surprising me despite everything. Chef, one of my line cooks approached, looking concerned. The Harrisons are asking to speak with you about their anniversary cake. Tell them I'll be right there, I said, grateful for the distraction. As I made my rounds through the dining room, checking on guests and accepting compliments on the food, I maintained a professional smile. No one would guess that the chef owner was experiencing the most humiliating night of her life. Years in the kitchen had taught me to compartmentalize, to function through burns, cuts, and kitchen disasters. This was just another kind of pain to work through. When I finished with the Harrisons, I purposely took a path that led me past Julian's table. They were midway through their entree, speaking in hushed tones. I slowed my pace just enough to catch fragments of their conversation. Once the campaign succeeds, Julian was saying. But what about her? Clara's voice, laced with concern. She'll understand eventually. The restaurant keeps her busy, and the prenup protects most of our assets. And your house? It's in both your names, isn't it? Julian chuckled. Technically, yes, but she's so sentimental about it being her grandmother's that she'll let me buy her out for far less than it's worth. My steps faltered. So this wasn't just an affair. They were planning a future together. A future that involved disposing of me like an inconvenient appliance that no longer served its purpose. I continued to the kitchen on autopilot, checking plates and directing the staff without truly seeing any of it. My mind was racing, piecing together conversations and incidents that suddenly made perfect sense. 2 weeks ago, Julian had asked me to sign documents updating our estate planning. I'd been so busy with the restaurant opening that I'd merely skimmed them, trusting him as I always had. Had those papers been setting the stage for our separation? The bracelet wasn't just a romantic gesture to his mistress. It was a calculated move. He was already treating my family heirlooms as his own, already parceling out my legacy. I returned to the bar, needing another moment to collect myself. Nathan Bennett had shifted closer to my seat, his expression darkening as he continued to watch Julian and Clara. When our eyes met, I saw my own pain reflected back at me. They work together? He asked quietly, gesturing with his glass. I nodded. She's his campaign manager. Funny, he said, his voice bitter. She told me she was having dinner with a female colleague tonight. Said they needed to prepare for a donor event tomorrow. The realization that we were both being lied to in exactly the same way sent a cold shiver down my spine. I'm Serena, I said, extending my hand. This is my restaurant. Nathan, he replied, his handshake firm. And apparently, that's my wife with your husband. Just then, Julian leaned across the table and whispered something that made Clara laugh. She glanced around before reaching into her purse and sliding an envelope across to him. He opened it discreetly, his expression changing to one of triumph as he reviewed the contents. What are they doing? Nathan wondered. I don't know, I said, but a suspicion was forming. Excuse me. I approached the hostess stand once more, this time checking the campaign's financial records on my phone. There it was, a substantial donation from Bennett Construction had been recorded last week, Nathan's company. Returning to the bar, I showed him the screen. Did you authorize this donation to Julian's campaign? His face drained of color. That's not possible. We're nearly bankrupt from the housing market downturn. Clara handles our personal finances, but she knows the business can't afford political donations right now. The final piece clicked into place. This wasn't just personal betrayal. It was professional, financial, and perhaps even criminal. Clara wasn't just sleeping with my husband, she was embezzling from her own. I watched Julian pocket the envelope, his other hand still resting possessively on Clara's arm, his fingers brushing against my grandmother's bracelet. Nathan, I said quietly, I think we need to talk. Nathan's construction-roughened hands gripped his whiskey glass tightly. I'm listening. We moved to a quiet corner of the bar, away from curious ears. I explained what I'd seen and heard, laying out the evidence of both betrayals, personal and financial. With each detail I shared, the slump in his shoulders lessened, replaced by a straightening of his spine. She's been handling the books since the recession hit, he said, voice low with controlled anger. Said she had a degree in finance I didn't know about. Turns out, there's a lot I didn't know. How much could she have taken? I asked. Enough to sink the company if this keeps up. We've got 30 families depending on Bennett Construction for their paychecks. I watched Julian signal for dessert menus, acting like he owned the place. In a way, he did. The restaurant startup costs had come from our joint savings, which he never missed an opportunity to remind me of. I'd assumed we were building something together. Now I realized I was just another asset in his portfolio, a stepping stone on his path to political success. We need to be strategic about this, I said, an unfamiliar calm settling over me. If we confront them emotionally, they'll find a way to twist it, make us look like the irrational ones. I'm not feeling particularly rational right now, Nathan muttered. I know, neither am I. But the best revenge isn't just exposing them. It's making sure they face consequences they can't charm their way out of. My years in professional kitchens had taught me that timing and preparation were everything. We need evidence, witnesses, and the perfect moment. Marcus, my head of security, appeared at my elbow. I'd hired him away from one of Seattle's most exclusive hotels, valuing his discretion as much as his imposing presence. You needed to see me, chef? I gave him a quick overview of the situation. His expression remained professionally neutral, but his eyes darkened when I mentioned the embezzlement. So, it's not just a domestic issue, he said thoughtfully. No. And I'd like to handle it without disrupting the other diners' experience, if possible. Marcus nodded. I've got 2 of my team on tonight. We can position them near the table when you're ready. Just give me a signal. He hesitated. Do you want me to call the police as well? I considered this. Not yet. Let's see what evidence we can gather first. After Marcus stepped away, I turned back to Nathan. How much do you know about what they've been doing? Not enough, he admitted. But I've got access to all our company accounts on my phone. If what you're saying is true, he pulled out his device and began scrolling through financial records. Meanwhile, I stepped into the kitchen to check on service and gather my thoughts. My sous chef, Isabella, caught my eye immediately. Everything okay, chef? You look like you're planning a murder. Just some unexpected drama with table 14, I said, forcing a smile. Can you handle the pass for another 20 minutes? Of course. She studied my face. Need backup? Maybe. I'll let you know. I returned to the bar to find Nathan staring at his phone, ashen-faced. 3 separate transfers to his campaign fund over the last month, $60,000 total. Money we don't have, disguised as materials purchases. My mind raced through the implications. Illegal campaign contributions, financial fraud, the perfect leverage. I've got their entire conversation recorded, Nathan said, showing me his phone. Started recording when I realized who she was with. Illinois is a 2-party consent state for recordings, but he shrugged. It's enough to confront them with, combined with the financial records. Exactly. I checked the time. Julian and Clara were lingering over dessert and champagne. His hand kept returning to her arm, fingers brushing against my grandmother's bracelet. The sight crystallized everything for me. In 20 minutes, they'll ask for the check, I said. Julian always gets uncomfortable if dessert lasts longer than that. It's our best window, before they've paid but after they've consumed everything. Nathan's eyes met mine, understanding dawning. So they can't just walk out. Precisely. I waved Luca over. When table 14 asks for their bills, stall. Tell them the system is processing. Give me a 3-minute warning. I excused myself to make a quick call to my lawyer, leaving a detailed voicemail about the prenuptial agreement and my concerns about the recent documents I'd signed. Then I texted my sister, asking her to send me digital copies of our grandmother's will and the house deed. Preparation had always been my strong suit. When I returned, Nathan had composed himself. I've contacted my company's attorney. He's pulling every financial record we have. If she's been embezzling, we'll find it all. Marcus approached again, standing respectfully at attention. My team is in position, he said quietly. Just give the word. I nodded, feeling an unexpected wave of gratitude for these people who barely knew me yet were ready to stand by my side. When Luca gives the signal, we move. The next few minutes stretched eternally as we finalized our approach. When Nathan and I discovered we lived only blocks apart, another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. They've been meeting at the Pine Street Motel, he said. Found charges on our credit card statement. Thought it was for business clients. 3 blocks from our house, I said, remembering Julian's hotel receipt. They weren't even trying to be careful. They thought we weren't paying attention, Nathan replied, a new resolve in his voice. They were wrong. Luca caught my eye and held up 3 fingers, the signal. Julian was asking for the check. I took a deep breath and smoothed down my dress. It's time. Want me to come with you? Nathan asked. Not initially. Let me start this. I caught my reflection in the mirrored backsplash behind the bar. For the first time since reading Julian's text, I felt fully present in my body. The hurt was still there, but it had transformed into something powerful. I wasn't just a betrayed wife or a woman scorned. I was the granddaughter of Margaret Wilson, who had pawned her most precious possession to save what mattered, who had worked double shifts with arthritis-gnarled hands to reclaim her legacy. Diamond hard, diamond bright. Marcus fell into step slightly behind me as I began the walk across the restaurant floor. Each step felt deliberate, my path clear. The murmur of dinner conversation, the clink of silverware, the subtle notes of the playlist I'd personally selected, all of it formed the perfect backdrop for what was about to unfold. I wasn't just going to confront my husband. I wasn't just going to reclaim my bracelet. I was going to reclaim everything. My family home, my dignity, my future. Years of compromise and accommodation fell away with each step, replaced by a certainty I hadn't felt since before I met Julian. As I approached their table, I caught Clara's eye first. Her smile faltered as she registered my expression and the large man following behind me. Julian was still studying the bill, oblivious to the approaching storm. Enjoying dessert? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady as I stopped at their table. Julian's head snapped up, his politician's smile immediately sliding into place. Serena, come join us. The chocolate soufflé is exceptional. Your pastry chef deserves a raise. I remained standing, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. Clara fidgeted with her napkin, not meeting my eyes. I don't think I properly introduced myself earlier, I said to her. I'm Serena Wilson Reed, Julian's wife. Today is our 8th anniversary. Her eyes widened, darting to Julian, who laughed dismissively. Honey, I explained about the dinner change. Clara and I have that donor meeting tomorrow, and we needed to prep. His voice carried just the right note of reasonable explanation, the tone he used when convincing constituents he had their best interests at heart. I smiled. Interesting, because the donation was made last week, according to the campaign finance records. I turned to Clara. How's Nathan doing, by the way? Still at the bar, watching his wife and my husband celebrate our anniversary. The color drained from her face. Julian's expression hardened as he realized this wasn't going to be smoothed over with his usual charm. You're making a scene, he said quietly, his eyes flicking to nearby tables. We can discuss this at home. Actually, we can't. You see, I've been reviewing those documents you had me sign 2 weeks ago. The ones you claimed were routine estate planning. I leaned closer. Did you really think I wouldn't have my lawyer examine them once I had a moment to breathe? He tried to trick me into surrendering my grandmother's house. Clara shifted in her seat. Julian, maybe we should. No, he snapped, then immediately softened his tone, aware of watching eyes. Serena is confused. Everything I've done has been to secure our future. Our future? I raised an eyebrow. Or yours and Clara's. His jaw tightened. I could see him calculating his next move, weighing public perception against damage control. That's absurd, he finally said. Clara is my campaign manager. This is a working dinner. I gently reached for Clara's wrist, turning it so the bracelet caught the light. Then why is she wearing my grandmother's bracelet, the one you told me was in your office safe? A nearby diner glanced over, curiosity piqued. It's similar but not the same piece, Julian attempted, his confidence wavering slightly. Perhaps you've forgotten the inscription, I said, unclasping the bracelet from Clara's wrist despite her startled protest. I turned it over, revealing the tiny engraved words on the clasp. Diamond hard, diamond bright. To Margaret, with love, 1941. Julian's expression shifted from confident to cornered. I felt a flicker of satisfaction watching him squirm. I thought it would be a nice gesture, he began, his voice low. Just for the evening. A nice gesture? I interrupted. To give away a family heirloom I specifically told you represented generations of my family's struggles. To let another woman wear my grandmother's legacy while you dined at the table I reserved for our anniversary. The whispers from nearby tables grew audible. I sensed Marcus positioning himself closer, his 2 security team members discreetly flanking the area. You're overreacting, Julian hissed, abandoning his public persona as panic set in. It's just jewelry. And there it was, confirmation that he'd never truly understood what the bracelet symbolized, what my family's legacy meant. He'd seen it only as an expensive trinket, a potential asset to leverage. I lifted my hand, the signal for Nathan to approach. As he made his way toward us, I held the bracelet up to the light. This, I said clearly, belonged to my grandmother, Margaret Wilson, who worked 37 years as a waitress at Dawson's Diner, who pawned it during the recession to save our family home. The same home you've been trying to remortgage without my knowledge to fund your campaign. Julian's eyes darted between me and the approaching Nathan, realization dawning. Speaking of your campaign, I continued, I wonder what the ethics committee would think of unreported donations from Bennett Construction, especially since Mr. Bennett here never authorized them. Nathan reached the table, his expression cold and controlled. Hello, Clara, he said. Stephen, this isn't. She gasped. You don't understand. I understand exactly what's happening, he said quietly. I've spent the last hour reviewing our company finances. Care to explain the $60,000 transferred to Reed's campaign fund? Money we don't have. The remaining color drained from Clara's face. Julian reached for his water glass, his hand visibly shaking. This is ridiculous, he blustered. A simple misunderstanding. If we could just... Mr. Reed, Marcus interrupted smoothly. I'm going to have to ask you and Ms. Bennett to remain seated until we've resolved this situation. Julian's eyes hardened as he took in the security personnel. Are you detaining us? That's illegal. I'm an elected official. No one's detaining you, I clarified. But since you haven't paid your bill yet, leaving would constitute theft of services. And given the potential campaign finance violations and embezzlement concerns, I thought you might prefer to discuss this privately rather than with the police. The mention of police made both of them flinch. Several diners were openly watching now, phones discreetly recording. Julian's political instincts kicked in as he realized how damaging this scene could become. "Let's be reasonable," he said, forcing a smile. "We can work this out." I slipped the bracelet onto my own wrist, where it belonged. "There's nothing to work out. The restraining order my lawyer is filing tonight will keep you away from my grandmother's house, which, as her will clearly states, was left to me alone before we were married. The prenup you insisted on works both ways, Julian." His face contorted with fury before he managed to school his features. "You wouldn't dare. Think about what this will do to my campaign." "I'm sure the voters will find it fascinating," Nathan interjected, "along with the company funds my wife apparently diverted to support it." Clara began to cry, not the elegant tears of a wronged woman, but the ugly sobbing of someone caught in their own trap. "Nathan, please, I can explain everything." "Save it for our attorneys," he replied coldly. I reached for the untouched champagne flute at their table, the same vintage I'd selected for our anniversary celebration. Raising it in a toast, I met Julian's eyes one last time. "To new beginnings," I said. "Happy anniversary, darling." I set the glass down without drinking and turned to Marcus. "Please ensure Mr. Reed and Ms. Bennett settle their bill before leaving. Everything else is in their names: hotel charges, campaign contributions, legal consequences." As I walked away, I heard Julian calling my name, his voice stripped of its usual authority. I didn't look back. 6 months later, I stood in my kitchen, my grandmother's kitchen, preparing a private dinner for the restaurant investors who had helped me buy out Julian's share of Starlight Bistro. The divorce had been finalized with surprising speed once the campaign finance investigation began. The bracelet caught the light as I chopped herbs, back where it belonged. The restaurant had thrived, despite or perhaps because of the publicity. People came initially for the gossip but returned for the food. The Seattle Times glowing review had called my fall menu a revelation of resilience transformed into culinary art. Nathan had stopped by earlier with a bottle of wine and news that his company was finally recovering after Clara's embezzlement was exposed. We developed an unexpected friendship, two people rebuilding their lives from similar betrayals. Nothing romantic, we were both too raw for that, but something equally valuable: mutual respect and understanding. Julian's political career had imploded spectacularly. Last I heard, he was working at his father's insurance company in Portland. His campaign dreams shattered by ethics violations and public humiliation. As I prepared the table, setting out my grandmother's china, I realized I was humming, something I hadn't done in years. The house felt alive again, filled with purpose and possibility rather than compromise and concealed resentments. Diamond hard, diamond bright, the Wilson women endured. We rebuilt. We thrived. And sometimes, when justice was served at just the right temperature, we even celebrated with a perfect final toast.